Hollywood never forgot his name, even when he tried to make them. Albert Finney was once the man every director wanted and every audience adored. After Tom Jones made him a sensation, he stood on the edge of a career that could have defined an era. But instead of stepping forward, he turned around. He said no to the kind of fame that consumes, no to the scripts that promised immortality, and no to the industry that wanted to own him. While others built empires, he built walls around his privacy. He didn't hire agents, didn't chase trophies, and ignored every invitation that came with flashing lights. The world saw his silence as arrogance. In truth, it was rebellion. Only after his passing would people uncover the letters that explained everything, words written by a man who found peace not in applause, but in disappearance. Albert Finney was born in 1,936 inches, Salford, England, a place of smoke, brick, and quiet resilience. The son of a bookmaker, he wasn't supposed to belong to the world of art and cinema, but even as a boy, he carried a spark, something unteachable, something untamed. At RADA, he learned how to shape that fire without letting it die. His teachers saw what few others did: a performer who didn't act to be seen, but to feel. That truth became his signature. By the time Saturday Night and Sunday Morning hit theaters, Finney had become the new face of British realism, a man who could make ordinary life look extraordinary. Then came Tom Jones, the film that changed everything. It was bold, chaotic, and magnetic, and so was he. Overnight, he became an international star. Hollywood called, ready to crown him their next king. But Finney wasn't looking for a throne. "I don't want fame," he said. "I just want work that means something." And in that quiet refusal, a new kind of legend began to take shape, one that didn't need the spotlight to survive. Albert Finney's rise was not built on glamour, it was carved out of truth. He grew up in the working-class heart of Salford, where dreams were rare and expectations smaller still. But there was something in his eyes, defiance, hunger, and a spark that refused to settle. That spark carried him all the way to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, where he became known for performances that felt more like confessions than acting. When he stepped into Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, 1,960, he didn't play Arthur Seaton, he was Arthur Seaton. Angry, restless, alive. His voice, his walk, his stillness, all of it spoke for a generation tired of pretending. British cinema had found its truth-teller. Then Tom Jones exploded onto screens, bawdy, witty, irresistible, and so did Finney. Overnight, he was everywhere. 5 Oscar nominations would follow in his career, but even then, he seemed strangely unmoved by success. He was already asking himself the question that would haunt him forever. How much of yourself do you lose when everyone knows your name? And from that moment on, the light that made him famous would become the very thing he began to flee. Fame had found Albert Finney, but he never invited it in. By the mid-1960 seconds, his face was on every magazine, his name whispered in every studio meeting from London to Los Angeles. He was offered the kind of roles that create legends: James Bond, Gandalf, even romantic leads in films built for stardom. But every time, his answer was the same: no. He refused to be shaped by fame's expectations. No press tours, no managers, no photo shoots. He skipped every Oscar ceremony, 5 nominations, not once attending. When journalists asked why, he smiled and said, "Because it's not my night. It's the film's." To some, he was difficult. To others, arrogant. But the truth was far more fragile. He was protecting the one thing Hollywood couldn't touch: his freedom. He didn't want to belong to anyone, least of all to an image the world demanded he maintain. But silence comes at a price. The more he withdrew, the more the industry tried to define him in his absence. Rumors grew. Curiosity turned to confusion. Yet Finney stayed quiet, a man who had chosen peace over praise, truth over glory. He had learned what few ever do: that fame is not the dream, it's the trap. For Albert Finney, decline didn't come from failure, it came from choice. While his peers chased franchises and fortunes, he slipped into smaller films, quieter rooms, and roles that spoke to the soul rather than the crowd. In Murder on the Orient Express, 1974, he buried himself beneath layers of makeup and accent, transforming into Hercule Poirot, another Oscar nomination, another disappearance right after. He didn't crave the spotlight. He seemed almost allergic to it. Between projects, he vanished completely, no interviews, no headlines, just stillness. To those who remembered him, it felt as if he had simply walked off the screen and kept walking. As the years passed, his public appearances dwindled. He turned down interviews, declined awards, and lived as though the world had nothing left to demand from him. When illness arrived, he met it the same way he met fame, quietly. No public statements, no spectacle, no pity. In the silence, there was peace, but also a melancholy beauty. He had once said, "Fame doesn't fade, you have to step out of its light." And that's exactly what he did with grace, with finality, and without ever looking back. The world learned that Albert Finney was gone in the simplest way possible: a quiet headline, a single photograph, and no public statement. In February 2019, he passed away at 82, leaving behind the same silence he had lived by. No cameras, no last interview, no orchestrated farewell. He spent his final years in London with his wife, Penny Delmege, living a life stripped of fame's noise. Neighbors described him as kind, private, and unassuming, a man who could walk the streets unnoticed and preferred it that way. His illness, known only to those closest to him, remained his secret battle carried with dignity and calm. When tributes began to pour in, Hollywood finally realized what it had lost. Not just a great actor, but a rare soul who had never compromised himself. Directors called him fearless. Co-stars said he was free. There was sorrow in the news, but also admiration, the kind reserved for those who lived life on their own terms. Even at the end, Finney refused to turn his life into a performance. He didn't fade away, he simply stepped beyond the light, leaving behind only the truth he had always served. Albert Finney left no autobiography, no confession, no memoir. His silence became his final masterpiece. Yet through it, his art continues to speak louder and truer than any headline ever could. In Saturday Night and Sunday Morning, he captured defiance. In Tom Jones, he embodied freedom. In The Dresser, he showed the ache of aging and the fragility of pride. And in Erin Brockovich, he proved that greatness doesn't need youth, only truth. You can see his fingerprints all over modern acting. Daniel Day-Lewis, Gary Oldman, and a generation of British performers carried his legacy forward, actors who, like him, believed in craft over celebrity. He didn't teach in classrooms or write books, but his philosophy was clear: be real, not remembered. That's why his absence feels so powerful. He didn't chase eternity, and yet, he achieved it. Albert Finney's legacy isn't a myth. It's a reminder that sometimes walking away is the most courageous act of all. Albert Finney lived between two worlds, one drenched in fame, the other wrapped in silence. He could have been one of Hollywood's eternal icons, but instead he became something rarer, untouchable. His light was his craft, vivid, grounded, and alive. His shadow was his refusal, the quiet rebellion of a man who would not sell himself for immortality. Together, they formed the truth of who he was, an artist who understood that freedom is worth more than fame. While others spent their lives chasing recognition, Finney mastered the art of letting go. He proved that greatness doesn't always shine in the brightest light sometimes. It lingers in the places where the light can't reach. He didn't want to be remembered as a star, and that's precisely why he will never be forgotten. When you hear the name Albert Finney, what do you see? The young rebel who defied Hollywood, or the older man who walked away from it all? If you could ask him one question, what would it be? Would you ask why he refused the spotlight, or how he found peace without it? Share your thoughts below. Tell us which of his performances still lingers in your mind, which moment made you believe in the power of authenticity. And if his story made you rethink what fame truly means, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Because here, on Fame and Shadows, we remember the stars who dared to disappear and the silences that still echo long after the lights go out.